In this video, I'm going to share with you some information about a time period called the Victorian Era. By the end of this video, you should know what the Victorian Era was, understand some basic beliefs of the Victorian Era, like identity, morality, and consumerism. The Victorian Era is named after Queen Victoria. She became Queen of England in 1837 when she was only 18 years old. She looked something like this. Victoria ruled until she died in 1901, after 64 years as queen. The Victorian era was a time in England's history when Queen Victoria ruled and there was political stability and strict cultural norms. When Victoria became Queen of England and the British Empire, the empire was quite big, spreading across the Americas, South Africa, India, and Australia. At the time of her death, the British Empire had expanded significantly, which might not be a surprise considering she was working on it for 64 years. Having one ruler in charge for such a long time had a couple of important effects on people living in the British Empire. The first is that it provided political stability. As you can imagine, it's hard to get things done if the person in charge is changing every few years. For example, during Queen Victoria's reign, there were 7 different kings in Germany and 18 different presidents in the United States. The people of the British Empire appreciated the consistency of having just one ruler in charge for such a long time. The second effect is that the political stability encouraged people to seek stability and order in their daily lives. And that included the way people acted and interacted in society. During the Victorian era, a strict set of social norms were created, and people were expected to observe them. If you didn't follow the social rules, you could expect to be rejected by your peers. For example, what you did on a daily basis and who you talked to depended on who you were. In other words, your identity. In Victorian England, your identity was made up of 3 things: your race, your gender, and your class. Whatever your combination of these 3 things, that would affect what you could do on a daily basis and in your life. Gender was similar. In keeping with the idea that everything had its place, people living in the Victorian era believed that men and women had their own places. For a variety of reasons, the woman's place was in the home. Because she was so much more nurturing and kinder and sweeter than men, so the theory went, the best place for a woman was to stay in the home, keep it clean, and raise children. Men, on the other hand, were meaner and tougher, so their place was the outside world, facing the harsh realities of the difficult worlds of business and politics. Those areas, according to these ideas, were no place for a woman. So your gender also affected what you could do or not do on a daily basis and in your life. For example, in the Victorian era, it was thought to be inappropriate for a woman to go out in public by herself. If she had to go out, she should be accompanied by a man, preferably her husband, her father, or her brother. The idea was that because the outside world was so harsh, the woman should be protected. One's gender affected their role in Victorian society and the actual physical spaces they could occupy. The last one is class. Communities, upper-class ones especially, communities in the Victorian era worked hard to establish clear divisions between people of different socioeconomic classes. The upper class were the wealthiest citizens, often those who were born into positions of privilege. The middle class was professional men like lawyers, doctors, business owners, and their families. They were financially secure, but perhaps not as well off as the upper class, or not a descendant of an aristocratic family. The working class was made up of people who were trying to get by on a daily basis. They were men, women, and children who worked at low-paying jobs and who struggled to afford the clothes on their back, a roof over their head, and enough to eat. In Victorian society, efforts were made to establish clear divisions between these classes. People of different classes would live in different neighborhoods. Other ways to distinguish yourself from members of another class were the people you socialized with and the clothes that you wore.